Right now, I'm joined by the Minister of Basic Education. Minister, let's start off by saying congratulations. You've done it once again.
No, thank you very much. We're really humbled and grateful that our schools and the teachers and parents supported our learners. And
how does this make you feel, though, on a personal level?
It's encouraging because it's real hard work. We run around schools, we're anxious throughout the year, we're trying different things to support our learners. And when some of our interventions work, it gives us confidence that we are on the right track. So it's really encouraging. It's sad that we can't get the 100% pass that we'd like, because at grade 12, they've been in the system for 12 years, and you really want them to leave with something. And it gets sad when some of them leave empty-handed.
Does this at all mean that at some point perhaps we might just break the 80% ceiling? Is it possible?
I had that ambition when I came in as Minister. It seems a very tough one. There's still lots of challenges in some of our areas. I mean, your small schools, which are just completely unviable in your deep rural. So there's quite a number of things that we've got to get right to at least hit that 80%. But I can say provinces are doing their best, but there's still lots of challenges in the system.
What would you say would be some of those challenges that we have this elusive 80%?
It's some unviable schools. I mean, you saw this today. There are schools which, about less than 10 of them, which got between 0 and 20%. And if you go and check in those schools, these are small schools in deep rural, which are completely unviable. You have 50 children's schools for grade 8 to 12. There is nothing you can do with it. So what we have to do, and what we're busy doing, is to consolidate those schools, open boarding schools. But it takes a lot of time, because we have to negotiate with parents, we have to really relocate, we have to close those small schools. So some schools, it doesn't matter what we can try and do, it will not work. They're just simply unviable. So those are some of the problems that we're facing with some deep rural schools. Some is just a poor culture of in those schools, which we're just not managing to turn around. But in the main, it's unviable schools. And a part of that unviable schools, and I remember that we spoke about this last year as well, and you had identified a few schools, and you said that these schools may have to close down. What seems to be the stumbling block? Why is there this pushback from communities? We're a democratic country. Before you take any decision, you have to consult with parents. They have to agree. That in itself takes a lot. It's a lifetime. It takes almost a year to sometimes negotiate with communities that the school has to close. But there are also financial and logistical matters where you find that indeed they are supposed to match with another school, which itself doesn't have enough space. But what normally delays is those engagements and negotiations with communities, and you can't close a school before you reach an agreement with communities.
Would it be fair for someone to say that part of the reason that we're not getting to this 80% is that now the department has decided to condone learners to grade 12? And I don't know, would you be really happy with the results that you're seeing?
I'm happy that, actually I think the percentage price of passing is less than the value of getting learners who didn't have a chance to pass. For me, I really will not grudge them for bringing the percentage down. I'm just grateful that schools have special programs to assist these learners, because most of them are overaged. They were going to be discouraged from schools, and in case schools can't keep you more than 3 years in the same grade failing, they'll have to ask you to leave. And what provinces are doing, I mean, in your affluent communities, these are well-to-do parents would get special tutors for them, would get special classes for them, and provinces went out of their way to support these learners who are struggling. So the price of not getting 80% as compared to the price of giving them this chance, some of them got bachelors. For me, it's more gratifying really than getting the 80% if that's the cost. So I really am not complaining about it. I'm just grateful that provinces are taking this extra route, because we're a big system and we can't have specialized education, so it's one size fits all. But now with these progressed learners, we're able to put them aside, give them special attention, and more than 50% of them have passed. Actually 55% of them have passed. And as I say, others even got distinctions because of this unpaid for special tutors or your your extra classes, and it has paid. It's paying away in a way.
I see that the numbers indicate that about 107,000 of them were registered for last year, but only 34,000 actually sat down to write the exam.
No, the difference is the 34 wrote a full exam. Some of them could see that if you ask them to sit for 6, they won't pass. So in September, we look at the marks and say to them, modularize. Write the 3 so that we're able to have focus in preparing for exams. Write the next 3 in June. So we've asked half of them, because we could see that they will not be able to pass all 6 subjects that they go. Otherwise, they'll fail all of them. So they would have set for, and that's why we were not listing them as, because they've not set for all 7 subjects. They would have written at least 3, and then they're going to write another 3 in June. In terms of, and we have this second chance program to really prepare them to go. Because some, we could see from their September results that they won't make it if they have to write 7.
Do you at all fear that the numbers might increase, the number of progress learners, in terms of the number of learners who sit down for these exams?
Not quite, because the secret, which is what I think moving forward will help the system, we have to sort out our foundations so that we don't have kids who come with deficits. Then when they get grade 12, they're overage, they've been repeating a lot, because it's quite clear our biggest problem is in the foundations. And now the sector is focusing a lot. We're working towards 2 years of ECD. We're focusing and making teachers in the foundation phase to lay the solid foundations, consolidating your intermediate, and in the senior you prepare them for the FET. If we can just get that line blank, we will not have these extra efforts that we have to do to get kids to pass. And because really the sector is focusing at the right point, which is in your foundations, your grade 1s, your ECD, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. If you get the first 5 years right, then you have the system right.
What wasn't the annual national assessment an answer to that, to try and fix those blockages and identify those blockages? No,
I mean, it's unfortunate how it panned out around the ANA. At the time, the teacher unions boycotted ANAs. I had sent out a circular to say, let's comment on this, because even ourselves from the department, we're at a point where we're feeling that too much assessment does not solve your problem. You can't assess in December if you're doing a diagnostic without remediating, giving yourself enough time to remediate, then you're assessing again. So I think the process has turned out to what I think should happen, where we don't write ANAs every year, we write ANAs 3 years. So really it was, for me, a productive fight. Here's the SG of SAT. It was a very helpful fight, because we ended up where we needed to, because in all honesty, you can't just assess every year and think you're going to get results. So we have 3 studies. The ANAs are still valid. We still know what the problems are. We have the 3 international assessments. So we have a clear sense of what needs to be done. So it's not the assessments that is going to help us now. It's doing what we are supposed to do, and at the appropriate time, maybe after 3 years, assess if those interventions are working. So I think we're fine.
So there has been the diagnosis now, at least we can say that, right? But it also speaks about the teachers, the role that the teachers would be playing, and Mokwena Maluleke will be joining us any moment from now to speak about the role of the teachers and whether the department is in all capacitating them to ensure that they play their role.
Now, what we can't deny, that teachers carry the system. Teachers make or break the system. So your teachers are your system. So that is very important that we work with them. But if you look at the assessments that we call the 3 tests, are pointing to many other things, are pointing to attendance, which has nothing to do with teachers. It's about parental control. It's about bullying, which has nothing to do with teachers. So the takeaway from those 4 studies we received, 60% of the challenges are not about teachers. 60% is really about the role of society, the reading culture in communities. Your country like Russia is leading because we're told 85% of Russians are readers. Even at home, they buy their kids books, they read whatever time they have. And it says 15% of us as South Africans are readers. So which means 85% of us are non-readers. So even those that can read don't read. So the reading culture in society is very poor. It also points to the children who attend school regularly do well. There's lots of absenteeism, there's lots of social problems in our communities, there's a burden of disease. So it raises quite a number of things that we have to do as society. And as I say, 40% relies on teachers, because in any case they're the anchor of the system, but 60% says all of us have to do something. Parents, communities,
yeah, and speaking about parents, one of the issues that we saw last year, again, Vuani, let's speak, for instance, about what happened in Klipspruit as well, where teachers went, where parents went on a strike and saying that they want a certain principle.
I know. It's those such incidents in our country. And again, that Vuani and the Vuani province in Limpopo, they were the leading province. Yeah. So despite the fact that they throw their toys when it's bad, when it's their time to pull themselves together, they still lead in Limpopo. So the Vembe district is still the leading district. Those learners that you saw from Limpopo, all of them come from Vuani. Your 4 of the top learners in the country come from that district. So it does mean there's something right they do generally as a community. But as I say, then they, on the other hand, unfortunately, fail their children when when things don't go well. They are unlike others that generally are not doing anything. Like a Klipspruit, they're not performing well, even in peace times. There are ones that are never out of school. They'll get a 0, but you won't get a 0 in Vembe district. There's something about that community.
It's extraordinary, I have to say. I have to say that it's certainly extraordinary watching Peter announce the top performers, and every time would say from Limpopo.
They're from Limpopo.
And it's certainly,
and from Vembe district, not all.
Yeah, it's certainly something interesting. But here's another issue, though: the destruction of property.
I know.
The destruction of property.
Just very sad. I mean. It was, the most shameful thing for that community. And even when we confronted them to say, this is the worst thing you could have done to yourself and to your children, to destroy property at this stage. You teach, obviously, the way you do well in education means there are certain positive values that you inculcate as a community. And then you do the direct opposite and do the worst. I was saying to them, even during 1976 school riots, never hit the target of 34 schools. So they've, within a month, they would have destroyed what the nation at the height of apartheid never did. So it was the most shameful, I think, act in that community. But as I say, they're always able to redeem themselves because their kids do very well. Let's just quickly touch on a few policies before we wrap up this interview. One of those policies that has been endorsed again by the ANC is that every school must have an indigenous language. How far do you think the department is in implementing that, ensuring that happens? Quite far, because people think it's not many. If you think in the sector, your non-Model C schools constitute 96%. So which means 96% of schools will have an indigenous language. The schools we're talking about are your former Model C schools, which are only 4%. And you will be surprised they are embracing the program. So we're rolling it out. We can't just have an overall implementation, because we have to train teachers, we have to provide resources, we have to provide additional teachers. So it's really resources that are slowing up the process. But all those schools embrace, they're very excited about the program. I just don't have the right figures now, but we are quite advanced. By I don't know what the target was, 2022, we will be there. So we're doing quite well even on that program. And the history as a compulsory subject across all the grades? Yeah, we've commissioned studies. We need to engage. There are different views about, to say, history, it's a science. So you don't, and the things that the research is saying, and compared to other countries, to say, what do other countries do in terms of science? Is it part of your life orientation? Is it part of civic education? Because the things that are being spoken about by people who advocate for history as a subject are not talking about the history science that we have. They're talking about ensuring that kids understand their history, understand their values. And it's not necessarily the history that we're teaching in schools around the world. and about the formation of the world, the powers in the world, about the relationships in the world. It's not the same thing that we're talking about. So we are engaging to really address that which they need to have addressed without distorting history as a subject and teaching of a subject. Very few countries will teach this history, which is a science, the way as a subject for everybody across the board. What people want and what the ANC, from what we hear, they want people, our South African kids, to have a proper history of Africa, a proper perspective of Africa, which is not necessarily the history about world powers, about Marxism, about capitalism. This is what we're teaching people about how the world evolved over time. So it's a different thing. But we have commissioned a study, we have a report, we're engaging, and we're ready to implement.
I know this is a quite recent constitutional court ruling, and it relates to the University of the Free State and introducing English as the single language of a medium of instruction. I wonder how this then affects the basic education department, or whether the department has at all been able to reflect on this.
You know, we are lucky that parents were voting with their feet. In our sector, Africans' parents themselves were registering their own kids in English medium schools to enable their kids to be able to participate in the broader world. So it has evolved on their own. There are little skirmishes there, but it's not a big issue, because the majority of our schools are either, a few of them are single medium schools, which we have allowed, but the majority of your previous single medium schools have moved into English or are doing a dual policy. So for us, it has already resolved itself, or it's addressing itself, not perfectly, but it's not a crisis in the basic education sector.
Well, certainly something that we're watching closely. Minister, once again, congratulations to you and the department, as well as all the teachers in the system and the pupils who've performed so well. There you have it from the Minister of Education.